The rain had begun to fall just past midnight, thin needles of silver striking the cobblestoned courtyard of Kensington Palace. Diana stood by the window, her reflection fractured by droplets, her heartbeat echoing louder than the storm. She had written the letter, folded it twice, sealed it with trembling resolve. "They won't let me go," she had whispered to herself, her voice almost drowned by the thunder. Outside, a lone car engine idled. Her driver, Henry Paul, waited, eyes scanning the darkened gates, nerves coiled tight. Tonight wasn't just an escape. It was rebellion against an empire that thrived on her silence. What neither of them knew was that every mirror in the palace had ears, and the walls had been listening all along. The black Mercedes glided through the palace gates as if swallowed by the storm itself. Inside, silence reigned, except for the rhythmic pulse of rain drumming on the roof. Diana stared through the window, watching the blurred world rush past, her thoughts flickering between fear and defiance. She had told no one, not even her closest aides. Tonight was meant to be hers alone. Henri kept his eyes forward, his jaw set tight, aware that something unseen trailed them. From the rearview mirror, blue lights flickered briefly in the distance, then vanished. "We're being watched," he muttered under his breath. Diana didn't respond. Her hand moved instinctively to the letter in her pocket, as if the words within could shield her from the storm outside. The city lights thinned as they neared the Thames. The hum of the engine masked the pulse of fear in the car. "They said I'd never make it out," Diana murmured, her voice low but firm. Henri glanced at her reflection in the mirror, determined but weary. He wanted to say something comforting, but what comfort could there be for someone running from an invisible crown? A shadowy car appeared 2 lanes behind them, its headlights unwavering. Henri's knuckles whitened around the wheel. Diana caught his glance and understood without words. "Keep driving," she whispered. The road narrowed, the rain intensified, and the night felt like it was holding its breath. They crossed Westminster Bridge as Big Ben loomed in shadow. The hour hand slid past 12:15. Diana leaned forward slightly, her voice breaking the hush. "Henri, if anything happens tonight, you must deliver the letter." His eyes flicked toward her in the mirror, unsure if she was speaking from fear or certainty. The tires hissed over slick pavement. Somewhere in the fog, the phantom headlights returned. "They don't want me to tell the truth," she whispered. Henri swallowed hard, gripping the wheel as the radio crackled with static, a voice faintly audible, distorted, as if whispering through the wires. "What truth?" Henri asked quietly. She looked out the window and answered, "Only," with silence. The road curved sharply toward the embankment, where the river shimmered with broken reflections of light. Henri checked the mirror again this time. The car behind them was closer. Too close. Diana's breath caught as she clutched the edge of her seat. "Don't slow down," she said softly, almost prayerfully. The night had turned predatory. Every raindrop felt like a camera flash. Henri pressed the accelerator, heart hammering, the tires hissing louder against the wet road. Somewhere in the dark, a lens glinted. The chase had begun, and as the Mercedes plunged deeper into the storm, Diana closed her eyes and whispered the words she'd written hours before. "They will never let me go free." The hum of the jet was barely audible above the storm's dying breath. Hours later, Paris appeared like a mirage, wet streets, glimmering gold beneath street lamps. Indifferent to destiny, Diana and Henri had landed under the guise of secrecy, the kind that royal couriers whisper about but never record. In the terminal's half-light, Diana moved quickly, her scarf drawn tight, her eyes scanning for familiar faces that should not be there. Henri walked beside her, calm but inwardly unraveling. "They followed us here," he said under his breath. She didn't answer, only met his gaze with a silence that screamed louder than fear. Every reflection in the glass walls seemed to move when they didn't, and somewhere, A camera clicked. In the quiet of the Ritz lobby, the clock ticked toward disaster. Henri argued quietly with hotel staff, insisting on discretion, on speed. Diana waited by the marble column, her hand brushing against the letter still hidden in her coat. The world outside roared for her attention, but inside, silence held court. A phone rang. Henri answered, his voice low, almost trembling. "The route's not safe," he whispered. Too many eyes. Diana looked up. "Then we find another." For a brief moment, their eyes met, conspirators in a plan too fragile to survive the weight of royalty. Above them, the chandeliers flickered, as if the air itself knew the night would not end in peace. The plan was improvised. Too many cameras, too little time. A decoy car waited at the front while Henri led Diana through the back entrance, past silver service doors and the scent of polished brass. The service corridor felt more like a catacomb than an exit. "They'll be watching the main gate," he murmured. Diana nodded, heart pounding. Somewhere down the hall, a shutter clicked against, someone unseen documenting every step. "How do they always know?" she asked softly. Henri didn't answer. The rain outside roared louder, as if urging them to move. He pressed the elevator button with a trembling hand. "Because, ma'am," he said at last, "they were never meant to stop watching you." The black Mercedes awaited them again, its paint glistening under the hotel's awning. Cameras flashed from across the street like gunfire. Diana flinched but kept moving, face veiled by determination. Henri whispered something to the security guard before opening her door. "They'll try to chase us. I'll lose them." She hesitated, hand on the handle. "Henri," she said quietly, "promise me you'll tell the truth no matter what they say." His eyes flickered, haunted, but he nodded. She stepped inside. The door closed with the quiet finality of a verdict. As the engine roared to life, thunder cracked above, echoing like prophecy. The car accelerated into the night, tires hissing over slick streets, flashbulbs trailing like ghosts. Henri's knuckles clenched white against the steering wheel. Behind them, the chase erupted. Motorbikes, cameras, shouts. Diana leaned back, whispering almost to herself. "It feels planned." Henri's jaw tightened. "Everything is," he replied grimly. The tunnel ahead loomed closer, its mouth dark, swallowing light. Rain blurred the road markings into ribbons of silver. "Henri," she said one last time. "What do they want from me?" His answer came quietly, a whisper carried by the wind through cracked windows. "Always, your silence." The Pont de l'Alma tunnel approached like the open mouth of night itself. The world outside blurred into streaks of white and gold, the stormlight refracting off every wet surface. Inside the car, Diana gripped the seat. Her heartbeat synchronized with the pulse of the engine. Henri's breathing grew shallow, his gaze darting between the mirrors. Behind them, headlights multiplied, motorcycles swarming like metallic wasps. "Hold on," he muttered, pressing harder on the accelerator. The tires screamed. "Henri," she whispered, "slow down, please." But he couldn't. The noise behind them was too close. And as they crossed into the tunnel, something flashed too bright, too fast, and everything shattered into light. In the split second before impact, silence expanded. Time fractured every droplet of rain, every flicker of light suspended midair. Diana turned her head slightly, her gaze soft yet knowing. Henri's lips moved, words lost beneath the rising roar. The concrete wall rushed closer, then the world convulsed in metallic thunder. Glass erupted, light vanished. The car spun once, twice, then everything went still. Smoke coiled through the tunnel like a serpent. From somewhere beyond the wreckage, the echo of sirens began, a hollow, distant lament. And through it, Faintly, a whisper. "Tell them! They followed us!" Chaos engulfed the tunnel. Flashes lit up the wreckage as strangers emerged from the shadows. Paparazzi, paramedics, ghosts with cameras. The smell of burning rubber mingled with cold rain. Henri's hand twitched once before falling still. Diana's voice, faint but determined, cut through the din. "Stop taking pictures. Help us." The response was silence, then more flashes. A photographer whispered, "We can't orders." She tried to move, reaching toward Henri. "Henri," she whispered again. "Don't leave me." His lips parted, voice broken but deliberate. "We're waiting." Then his head dropped, and the sound of sirens drowned the rest. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but time had already slowed to grief. Diana's breathing faltered. Her voice trembled as she tried to speak. "Please, tell my boys I tried." The medic beside her hesitated, caught between duty and disbelief. Cameras still clicked, even as defibrillators sparked. Henri lay motionless now, one hand still clutching the steering wheel. His final words replayed in the medic's mind, those unfinished syllables, echoing like confession. They were waiting? Who were they? The air thickened with unasked questions as the tunnel filled with blue light and the ghosts of 1,000 unspoken truths. The tunnel was sealed within minutes, but it was already too late. Rain continued to fall, whispering against the concrete as if nature itself mourned. An officer stepped forward, looking at the wreckage, then away, knowing what this meant, knowing what would be said. Henri's radio still crackled faintly, one message half-spoken through static. "Confirm, neutralized." The word lingered, heavy, final. Diana was carried out beneath the flash of 1,000 lenses, her silence immortalized. In the distance, the sign shimmered, reflecting the fractured light of the city. And as dawn approached Paris, the truth remained where it always had, buried in the echo of Henri's last breath. Morning descended on Paris like a ghost refusing to rest. The Pont d'Argent tunnel had been sealed, its silence guarded by men in immaculate coats and unreadable eyes. The world awoke to headlines written in hysteria. "Tragic accident claims the Rose Duchess." But within the palace of Aurelian, there were no tears, only murmurs. Officials argued behind closed doors, trading glances sharper than blades. A single note had been recovered from the wreck, water-stained, half-burned. Its final words read, "If I vanish, look to the crown." By evening, the king's spokesman dismissed it as forgery, but the guard who found it had already vanished. Inspector Renaud Lestrel was the first to question the official story. No skid marks, no evasive pattern. And yet, they say he lost control. His voice carried through the sterile hum of the forensic hall. Photographs lined the wall, each frame a fragment of confusion. The Duchess's watch stopped at precisely 0:23. Adrian's blood alcohol report arrived too quickly, too conveniently. "A perfect tragedy," Renaud muttered. His assistant glanced around nervously. "Sir, the palace asked for a full stop on this." Renaud smirked, lighting a cigarette. "Then we're closer than they want us to be." By the third day, leaks began to flow faster than truth could be contained. A former palace aide claimed that Serafina had planned to flee that night, not just from the crown, but from something darker. A contract, whispered in corridors, linking her disappearance to the Royal Intelligence Council. Renaud listened in silence, eyes narrowed. "And Adrian?" he asked. The aide hesitated. "He was ordered to bring her back, not to save her." The room fell silent, the gravity of betrayal sinking like lead. In the corner, an evidence bag gleamed under the lamp, a torn page from Serafina's journal. One sentence was still legible. "Freedom costs blood." Night returned to the city, and with it, the silence of fear. Renaud's phone rang once, then stopped. When he checked his files the next morning, the photographs were gone, every negative, every digital copy. Even the watch had vanished from evidence. He walked through the rain toward the Pont d'Argent, his coat clinging to him like a second skin. The tunnel stood quiet now, scrubbed clean, as though tragedy could be erased by polish. But he noticed something new: faint etchings in the wall near the crash site. 3 words carved into the stone, shallow yet deliberate. They were waiting. Renaud's cigarette fell to the ground, hissing out in the rain. By dawn, the king appeared before the nation, eyes dry, voice rehearsed. "We have lost our beloved Serafina in a tragic accident," he declared, each word wrapped in practiced sorrow. Across the city, black ribbons fluttered, but in the depths of the capital's archives, a sealed report waited, marked for royal eyes only. Inside were photographs that contradicted every word of his speech. Renaud never saw them. That evening he was reassigned to Foreign Affairs and sent away. The case was closed, but across Europe whispers grew louder. The Duchess didn't die free, she died knowing. And those who knew what Adrian had whispered before the crash never spoke again. Weeks passed, but the city refused to forget. Murals of the Rose Duchess bloomed across stone walls, her eyes painted as though still watching. In the quiet corners of Aurelian's cafes, rumors spread of hidden files, of missing guards, of a truth too dangerous to be spoken aloud. Inspector Renaud, now exiled to a desk job near the border, received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a cassette tape, old and crackling. A single label scrawled in faded ink read, "Pont d'Argent 022. When he pressed play, there was static, and then a voice, faint and trembling. They didn't crash. They were blinded. Renaud froze. The voice was unmistakable: Adrian Valois. Renaud replayed the tape until dawn. After the voice came a thud, a scream, then silence. Blinded. He whispered. He replayed the word, each time hearing it differently. Blinded. Lied in. The ambiguity drove him mad. He met his former contact, Elise Varon, a journalist long marked by the Crown's disfavor. She listened once, eyes narrowing. "That wasn't a crash," she said. "That was execution. Renaud warned her to burn the tape. She didn't." That night her apartment was broken into. The only thing missing was her notebook. The tape remained, as if someone wanted her to keep listening. By morning, Elise had vanished. Renaud found her notebook discarded in a gutter near the river. Inside were fragments, sketches of the tunnel, coordinates, and one chilling phrase underlined 3 times. The flash came from ahead. Beneath it, a symbol, a royal insignia, crudely crossed out. The implication was unbearable. He realized Adrian's whisper, "They were waiting," wasn't paranoia. It was a confession of foreknowledge. Someone in the palace had cleared the road, planned the route, and timed the glare. The crash was not random, it was rehearsal turned ritual. Renaud stared at the notebook until dawn, feeling the Crown's shadow lengthen across his soul. The palace held a memorial in Serafina's honor: white roses, candlelight, and choreographed grief. Renaud watched from afar, hidden among the crowd. King Alaric stood before the world again. Speaking of destiny and divine will. But behind him, one of the guards shifted nearby, a young man, whose face Renaud recognized from an evidence photo. After the ceremony, Renaud approached him quietly. "You were there, weren't you?" The guard hesitated, eyes darting to the palace gates. "I saw the lights," he whispered. "Not headlights." A flash from the underpass wall. Then he pressed something into Renaud's palm. Small silver emblem marked with the royal seal and vanished into the crowd. That night, Renaud sat alone in his apartment, turning the emblem under the lamplight. It wasn't jewelry, it was a trigger cap. The kind used in military-grade flash devices. His breath caught. The crash had been staged by precision, not panic. Outside, sirens wailed distantly. He reached for the cassette again, replaying the moment one final time. After Adrian's broken whisper, came a faint, metallic click, then a blinding burst of white noise. Flash, he muttered. The truth was no longer speculation. It was. And as the lights of Aurelian flickered outside his window, Renaud realized something horrifying. Someone knew. He had figured it out. Rain slashed across the boulevards of Aurelian as Renaud drove through the night, his wipers keeping rhythm with his heartbeat. Every mirror carried headlights that never fell away. He knew the pattern-tailing intimidation, the quiet promise of erasure. Inside his coat pocket, the silver emblem burned like guilt. He turned onto Rue de Vignes, a forgotten industrial street where allies once met in shadows. The air smelled of iron and fear. From the alley emerged a figure cloaked in black, a woman. "You don't know me," she said softly. "But Serafina trusted me." She held out a key. "If you want the rest of the truth, follow where she planned to go." The key led him to the outskirts, an abandoned estate, once owned by the Aurelian Royal Archives. Inside, dust-coated forgotten ledgers and decaying portraits. Renaud moved by flashlight, the beam trembling across shelves marked private correspondences. One drawer was sealed by wax, bearing the same crest as the key. When he broke it open, a gust of stale air escaped like a sigh. Inside lay letter, Serafina's handwriting unmistakable. "They fear truth more than death," one read. "If I do not return, the council will bury me twice in stone, once in story." Renaud realized he was holding her true will. The next evening, news broke that Renaud had been charged with tampering with royal property. His name vanished from official records before sunset. Agents raided his apartment, but he was already gone. Beneath the catacombs of Aurelian, he met again with the hooded woman, her name now spoken. Mireille Duval, once Serafina's personal secretary. She wanted to publish everything after her exile, Mireille confessed. Adrian was meant to drive her to the embassy, not the tunnel. Renaud's pulse quickened. Then who changed the route? Mireille met his gaze. Someone who sits on the throne. Above ground, the city glittered with false peace. The royal guard moved through the streets like silent ghosts, clearing every trace of dissent. Renaud and Mireille escaped through the old sewer tunnels, clutching the Duchess's letters sealed in oilskin. "Where will we go?" she whispered. "Where the crown can't reach," he replied. But even underground, the hum of engines followed. Ahead, faint light marked an exit. Behind, footsteps echoed a dozen, maybe more. Mireille turned to face them, pistol trembling. "Go!" she hissed. Renaud hesitated, torn between duty and loyalty. Her final smile was calm, resolute. "She died for the truth. Don't let it die with us." By dawn, the newspapers declared Mireille a traitor and Renaud missing in service. Yet somewhere in the countryside, a small farmhouse light flickered. Inside, Renaud spread Serafina's letters across a wooden table. Her words were no longer evidence, they were prophecy. When they silence one voice, 10 more will rise. He packed the letters into a leather satchel, glancing once toward the horizon where the palace spires caught the morning sun. "They think they've buried her," he whispered. But the ground is already cracking. As he stepped into the mist, a single white rose lay on the doorstep, fresh, dew-kissed, and waiting. Weeks turned into whispers, whispers into momentum. Across Aurelian, anonymous letters appeared, each one containing fragments of Serafina's writings. "Freedom costs blood." One line read, But tyranny costs souls. The people began to gather under candlelight vigils, chanting her name not in mourning, but in defiance. Renaud, hidden in plain sight among them, watched as the city awakened. In his coat, the Duchess's final letter rested, addressed not to a friend, but to the future monarch of Aurelian. He knew what it meant. Truth was not a weapon, it was contagion. And once released, it could never be buried again. The crown responded as it always had, with spectacle disguised as compassion. King Alaric announced a day of remembrance for the Duchess, promising unity and closure. But behind the polished podium, his hands trembled. Every journalist had received an unmarked envelope that morning. Inside, transcripts of Seraphina's hidden letters, authenticated by her seal. The words burned through protocol and propaganda alike. "She lives in paper," one anchor whispered. As cameras flashed, Alaric looked up to see a single protester standing before the palace gates, holding a white rose. Then another. The air thickened with reckoning. At dusk, Renaud stepped into the royal archives once more, this time uninvited. Guards stood aside. The city's unrest had already begun. Deep within the hall, beneath glass and gold, lay Seraphina's portrait, her eyes painted with impossible knowing. Renaud placed the final letter beneath it. "You wrote it for him," he murmured. "But the people were always your heir." He struck a match, holding it until the flame kissed the letter's edge. Fire spread across the parchment, consuming the lies inked over truth. The alarms blared, but Renaud didn't flinch. "Let it burn," he whispered. "Let it finally breathe." By nightfall, the palace was surrounded not by mobs, but by silence. Thousands stood in candlelight as bells tolled across the city. The crown's guards lowered their weapons. For the first time in Aurelian's history, the people demanded truth, not vengeance. On every broadcast, Seraphina's final words echoed, recorded from her recovered letters. "Freedom is not granted by kings. It is taken by those who remember." Renaud watched from the crowd, the glow of revolution reflected in his eyes. The palace that once silenced her now stood like a confession against the dawn. When dawn finally arrived, it was quiet. The throne room lay empty, the royal banners torn down. No king, no guards, only a single object remained on the seat of power. A white rose. Renaud entered slowly, carrying a folder bound in leather. He placed it beside the rose, whispering, "Your truth lives now." Through the tall windows, sunlight cut across the marble like absolution. The air no longer smelled of furinely of rain, paper, and beginnings. Outside, church bells chimed 12 times, each echo marking the end of an era. The Rose Duchess had finally escaped the palace,